welcome back to Modern Education. I'm the host of Modern Education, Benjamin S. Woodford, here in the studio with you one more time with Emily Quiles and some guests for our next live taped in studio show of Modern Education. Modern Education is here every Friday from 3 to 4 p.m. for your commute home as we give you live talk and current events and everything you may want to know about education coming at you from the KZSU studio here on the Stanford campus under Memorial Auditorium. Emily, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you, Ben?
Fantastic. Super excited to be back here. Do we have a guest this week?
Oh, I think we have plenty of guests today.
Oh, we do, don't we? Yeah.
A room full of guests.
It's weird to ask a question when you already know the answer because I can see all our guests. But yes, we have some guests today. It's going to be a lot of fun. But what are we doing? What's going on? What is happening in Modern Education this week?
So we are talking to a group of PhD program people who are under Ideas Fellowship, which is a program under Stanford which helps out with creating a more mentorship program between one-on-one. Would you like to help me out, Ben?
Yeah. I think I can.
I think you can.
What I know of this program, because I'm part of it, is there is a mentorship element where PhD students are mentoring PhD hopefuls who are considering or thinking about what it might be like to be in a PhD program. And this program is giving them a chance to come on the Stanford campus, be residential for 6 weeks on the campus, and they're actually getting a chance to work one-on-one with PhD students here and see what the current research that they're working on is and how that's going down. And it's, I think, a really great experience. I know I'm actually one of the mentors in this program, and it's a blast to get to work with such an awesome PhD hopeful who, of course, now I hope she will be a PhD someday, but you never know. And I wouldn't be disappointed or, anything one way or the other because I think it's a great experience. And, modern education is all about giving people information about what they may or may not want to do with their own educational experience. So I think this is a great thing for us to be talking about this week. And we got the rest of our guests just filtering into the studio now like quiet mice trying to get in there.
But that was a great explanation, Ben. And I feel like this is a great, because we have so many, okay, I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6 guests.
Yeah,
today.
Well, why don't you start introducing them and I'll be right in there.
How about let's go around the table and give a nice introduction about your name and the program that you've been helping with, and let's talk about kind of like general, whatever you'd like to put out there to our listeners.
Okay. I'm Catherine Limmy, and I'm a mentor in the Ideas program this summer. And I've been working with Gabriela, who's sitting here next to me, on a project where we're developing a interview protocol to interview students and study their use of translanguaging as they discuss science concepts.
Very nice. And Gabriela?
Yes, my name is Gabriela Sanchez-Quilorin. I'm from Texas. I'm a master's student at the University of San Antonio, University of Texas at San Antonio. I don't know if I say I'm working a master's in bilingual education. So for me, this is a great opportunity because we're using a concept that is translanguaging that is about 10 years, in the educational field, kind of known. And we're trying to merge with science, which is a fantastic experience for me.
I'm Rosa Chavez. I'm a doc student here at Stanford. I'm working with Dominique, and we're working on my dissertation proposal, which looks at how teachers make sense of high-stakes policies to inform their instruction, and then how students in third-grade elementary classrooms in particular start to take that up to start to think about how they see themselves as math learners.
I'm Jamila Espinosa, and I'm working with Juan Miguel this summer, and we are looking at teacher efficacy in informal spaces of education, so specifically in after-school programs, and I'm also really excited to be here today.
I'm Dominique, and I'm working with Rosa, and she briefly went over just a little summary of her proposal, and I'm really excited to be here as well. A little nervous, but I'm excited.
Okay.
I'm Brianna Diaz. I just graduated from the University of Texas at San Antonio, but I'm from Houston, Texas. I'm working with Ben this summer. I'm an Ideas Fellow, and we're working on implicit math bias, which has been really interesting.
Yeah, sounds like we have a lot.
It kind of seems strange to introduce myself on my own show, but I'm also a guest this week, which is kind of a fun thing. Okay, so I'm a PhD student here at Stanford as well, and I'm working with Bree, and we're doing some work looking at bias in mathematics education, and kind of not just bias as an implicit thing, but also explicit anxiety and self-concept around how you see yourself as a math person or not, which, funny enough, seems to be the most important question you can ask so far for my early findings. Everything else doesn't seem to give nearly as much information as simply asking, are you a math person or not, which is kind of cool and frustrating, and I've been stuck in statistics for a couple days, so leave me alone. But so let's dive right in here, huh?
Yeah, let's get a little bit more into what kind of drove you into the realm of education, because this, from my understanding, has all kind of been a collaboration and understanding of how to help education and the fields of education. So if you all want to go at once, let's go. 1, 2, 3.
Or whoever
would like to go.
Share that like to pop about how they became interested in education.
I can start. Okay, so I was born and raised in Mexico. Over there, I was a Spanish instructor as a second language. But when I moved here, I was just a housewife. Soon I had young children. I started to see their education in the early childhood in educational centers. And I started having an interest in early childhood, So, and sooner or later, I completed my degree in early childhood. But I saw that there's a disparity in education and in appropriateness for children who are emerging bilinguals. So that's why right now I'm trying to mix, my background with bilingual education so I can help students who are emerging bilingual but are young.
That's really interesting with the young aspect, especially because I've worked at preschool, and a lot of them are immigrant children, and it ends up becoming this really interesting dynamic where the teacher sometimes really struggles with if the resources are not there immediately, and then it ends up putting the child behind, and it just creates more of that frustration. So do you have any comments about, for say, tips on bilingual in teaching, or with a bilingual student?
Well, at that age, it's very important that teachers can communicate with the children, and if they are not talking the same language that the children, that's going to be hard, because a lot of the learning is not through, it's a lot of playing, stuff like that.
So is it more like the body language?
Yes, a lot of that, but also that's why it's important that a teacher first speak the language of the child. If not, English immersion, in that age used to be famous, but it's no more. It's no more famous. It's one of the least effective methods.
I'm going to jump in here for a minute. Just it's so hard to have a productive conversation with everybody taking a turn in such a big group here. So I'm thinking maybe we're just going to try to take a little theme and bounce some ideas around here. Okay, so we're talking about possibly going into PhD studies, right? This is a group of people trying to mentor possible PhDs and a group of people who are thinking about possibly being in a PhD program, right? So what is something maybe you've learned through this experience that you did not know or expect PhD life would be like, or for the mentors, something that you really wanted to make sure you instill for your fellows as you're working through this?
I can start with
Please do. Yeah, get right up on the mic there.
Sure. I think that just being here and being able to talk with different mentors and hear different sides and stories of how people got to this point, it seems very attainable for us and very realistic for us. And for me personally, at first, I wasn't sure even if I would get past my bachelor's and possibly maybe master's and a PhD, no way. I wouldn't even make it that far. And so now being here is kind of showing me that I can do it and that I'm able to actually go as far as I want to go in education. And so, I think that's...
Wow, that's powerful. Self-belief is amazing, isn't it? Without that, it's hard to even start the journey. Thank you for sharing. That's amazing. What else?
I think on my end, something that maybe was very surprising was the degree to which students are also navigating grad school. To me, it seemed like I had that experience in undergrad, so I thought, by the time I get to grad school, I'll probably know how to do this a little bit better. But it seems like a lot of that theme of not knowing how to do things completely still carries over into grad school, and it depends a lot on your mentors and your social network to decide where you can access additional support, and that's very important in the entire experience here.
Yeah, it's that idea that keeps seeming to coming up around like ambiguity as part of the process, and asking questions is such a powerful way to start moving in the directions you want. And I think a lot of us, when we don't have the self-belief or the understanding that we are supposed to be asking those questions, we think we're already supposed to know, right? So it's amazing you can bring up this idea so clearly that we just don't know, and that's part of navigating the sort of seemingly treacherous waters, but it's actually attainable, right?
The part of learning.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can say for my experience working with Catherine, we start with a pilot, and we have been modifying, right? And we modify several times to try to create a better pilot for the interviews that we're thinking about. So I think that learning, for me, I learned that a pilot you can modify, so it's something that grad students do. There isn't just an immediate finished product. It is a process. Yeah, absolutely. You want to jump in there? Please do.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, one of the things I really wanted to help Gabriela understand is, and myself as well, because I'm still learning this, is that the process of research looks a lot different when you're actually doing it than what you assume research is like when you read a finished paper. And so we've been going through this process of refining our interview protocol, testing it out, piloting it, and changing it, and it's taken a while. And I think sometimes the pace of research is a little different than what we assume it might be. But I think we're going to have a really good product in the end, and we're going to actually be answering our research questions with the interview questions that we are developing. And so I think that's been a really great experience for both of us. And also, it's really important to me that my mentee understands she has a lot to contribute. She's not just here to learn from me. She has a lot of knowledge and background and experiences that are really helping my project to move forward and to be better.
Sounds like a really great pairing. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's something I've really felt with Ben, too, just working on his project with him, is that whenever I suggest things, he's like, I didn't think about that. That's actually really good. So it feels very validating to be in this space and actually feel like you're contributing, even as someone who's fresh out of undergrad who feels like they don't know anything. That you do have something to contribute. So that's really special.
Funny thing about having something to contribute means you actually have to work hard, though, right? It's not just an easy little like cookie cutter thing. I'm personally trying to give you projects that are things that I haven't done yet or don't know how to do, because otherwise I'm just making up stuff for you to look busy, right? And I think it's a funny thing how we're more satisfied with something meaningful that's actually hard than just being told, oh, good job, you did the X's and the O's and played tic-tac-toe or something, right? It's much more powerful to have something meaningful to do and to feel like it's worth your time, right?
And probably in the end where you actually are seeing these results happen right before you, and you have this given opportunity to be able to show what you and reveal what you can actually do, which it sounds like this program brings out.
Rosa, do you have any real takeaways you're hoping your mentees got?
Yeah, I can definitely add that I'm really excited to be working with Dominique. I don't know if she mentioned it, but she is a student at UTSA, and I'm helping with the partnership, but I'm doing some of my research in Texas, which she's going to be helping with.
Aren't you from Texas?
I'm also from Texas.
Oh, what a great pairing. That's awesome.
But I'm really excited to have her work on the project and be able to see it from conception to the end. Since she's helping with the proposal part, we've developed some of the protocols. We've gone over the survey that we're administering. We've been going through IRB protocols. And then she's going to be able to help with classroom observations, collecting data in Texas. So it's going to be really great. And I'm really excited that she gets to be part of it. And also that she gets to be here and experience some of the classes that she's sat in for during the summer. She's interested in the STEP program, so I've been able to have the opportunity to have her sit in the class that I've been teaching in the summer. So it's just been really great, and I hope that she takes away that she can see herself here and that she belongs here, if that's where she chooses to come for her graduate degree.
Definitely.
Wow.
Definitely.
I'm getting
That's
kind
nice.
of butterflies inside. That was so sweet. Okay. Well, the show's done. Now we can't do any better than that. Let's just all go home. Just kidding.
Still got 45 more minutes. Don't leave too quickly. So let's talk more about like kind of the research that you have been doing. What are these products that you guys are talking about? What is the process that you've been talking about? If anyone would like to chime in?
Sure, I'll start. So, yes, I did forget to mention that I am a rising senior at the University of Texas, San Antonio, education major, early childhood through 6th grade. So this is a perfect opportunity. But as far as like research thus far that we've done while I've been here, I really we established goals at the beginning of our partnership or mentor-mentee relationship, and I really wanted to focus on preparing for data collection. So like IRB, how you come up with your interview questions and how you make sure that there's no bias in any of your questions and things like that. And so we really focused on preparing for that data collection point because with working on some previous research before this program, I kind of noticed that, I kind of noticed that getting up to the point of data collection can be a little bit more difficult than one could imagine. Mm-hmm. And so like the fun part is actually getting your data and reading through it and getting all of your answers, but then getting up to that point is difficult. So I wanted Rosa to kind of show me the way about that, and she really has. So I'm really excited that I kind of know the ropes about IRBs and what type of language to use and things like that.
What's an IRB?
It is the
Institutional Review Board.
Okay.
Right. So IRB is basically a way of keeping checks and balances on research to make sure people are doing ethical practices and, taking care of anonymity for the people that they're getting data from and things of that nature. And each institution has their own board that does that.
Okay. So you mentioned as well that you wanted to consider bias within your surveys and your research. How do you go about handling bias? And I know a couple people here, probably everyone, goes through that.
No, we review several times, and we try one of our pilots, and we talk about that. Said, it's a lot of discussion. You gotta be talking constantly with your mentor about all the possibilities, that you can encounter. So we have been, cleaning and cleaning and cleaning because we find little things here, little things there.
Can you give me an example of some things that you have found that would be under the branch of bias when you're doing these surveys? Or
that would be. I think in the type of research that we're doing, it's a little bit different because we're really exploring how students express their understanding of science concepts, and we're trying to open up space to see if we can open up space for them to draw on all of their language abilities to do that, and potentially opening up space for them to do translanguaging, which is using more than one language in complex ways to say something. So for us, I think we've been talking a lot about how do we design the questions so that we're opening up space for them to do that, but without necessarily inducing them to do that, and how could that influence classroom practice. Yeah.
I'm really curious about this. What are some of the strategies you use to make the questions open to different ways of coming in with an answer instead of guiding the person? How do you go about thinking through that?
We've been talking a lot about how the teacher phrases the question itself and what language practices the teacher models. And so Gabriela is piloting some of the questions, and she's actually using both Spanish and English in her language practices as she's interviewing the person, hoping that modeling that will open up space for them to use both languages.
Wow, that's really neat. It's such a simple idea to just model using multiple languages fluently, going back and forth between them.
And see,
but if you don't show a student what that looks like, they're never going to know how to do it themselves, and they're not able to pull on their full set of resources, right? Language resources, vocabulary resources. Wow, that's really neat.
Yes, and as I said, we have been, this what she just told you is something that we were talking today through the experience of several things that we have been talking. So takes a while, a lot of discussions, a lot of talking, etc.
Well, it is a process, right? Research is such a funny thing how it looks like this nice clean thing when you publish a paper or you read a published paper, right? Now, this is actually something I was curious about and maybe this will start with the fellow or with the mentors on this question, just thinking about, is it hard to make sure you're giving an honest appraisal of that difficult process of actually putting together a project? Because it can be easy to make it look like you've put a lot of thought into this and kind of package it for your student if you're knowing you're going to have that opportunity. But do you feel like you're able to give the full breadth of the struggle and the ambiguity that is really involved in getting to the point where you can have help?
I mean, I think as a mentor, I tend towards being very honest with everyone that I've mentored, almost to the point of like I'm trying to, set up some filters for my honesty. So I haven't found it challenging. I feel like I've just been very open and honest with her about what the process has been like for me.
Likewise, our goal with working with Dominique was to make sure that she understood what the process was like. So being very open. I've shared all of my documents where I've been working on my proposal. She's read through my entire proposal. She's read through my advisor's feedback. So it's just been very helpful to be able to see the entire process instead of just saying like, here's my neatly packaged dissertation proposal that's complete and that has been approved versus this is the 7th version of it. Yeah.
Right.
Many versions. Would you like to answer your own question, Ben?
Oh. Yeah, I will. So I've been trying to make a purposeful effort to talk with Bree about that specifically, because I did try to set up the 6 weeks to give her a little bit of a taste of all of the stuff along the way, the writing, the literature reviews, the data collection, the statistics, all of that. And it's hard to put all that in a 6-week process and actually make it something that's coherent and also not just sort of a package deal that seems too clean to be real. And I think I've tried to talk about this, and I've tried to sort of pull back the curtains similar to the other mentors and just say, hey, look, this is what's happening today, but this is kind of when it went into it, and this is how we got here. And it really is a process, so I hope that's coming through. I don't know. What do you think, Bree? Are you am I doing that effectively? Is there something that you've taken away from that as far as seeing that process and recognizing that it was also a year of prep?
No, yeah, I think I definitely got that, and I feel like little moments really hammer that in, like us working on the data analysis yesterday and thinking it was going to happen a lot faster, and then we get into it and we're like, whoa, this is weird. And then just little things like that have reminded me this isn't something that you get done in a year. Like PhD programs are 5 to 6 years. And I feel like coming into it, like doing my senior thesis, which I spent a year on, and came out with this pretty little packet of paper that said my name and thesis under it. I was like, oh, PhD programs just like that, but like a little bit longer. Yeah, I definitely see the real side.
Okay.
How would you say that your thesis to the actual research is so different? Because I haven't done research myself, but I have written a thesis, which made me want to pull my hair out. Mm-hmm. So are you just pulling all your hair out now with this research? Is it extra? Or
I don't think I'm pulling my hair out at all, just because I feel like Ben's doing most of the hard work and then giving me enough hard work to where I'm pushing myself, but not to where I feel like I'm pulling my hair out. But I feel like doing my thesis, it wasn't nearly as... I don't think there were as many standards, because I think there's just a lot more of a push to try it out. So it's like practice research. At least that's how it was for me. And so now whenever I go back and read it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. Yeah. Why didn't my mentor let me do this? Yeah. But I realized that it was less about the methodology I used and all of those things. It was more about getting students excited about finding a research question and then coaching them along. And maybe your thesis isn't going to be very pretty by the end, but you have experience and you feel like this is something you would want to continue to do. And then you go into something that's
kind of like modeling the behavior of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I'm curious about what you're going to do when you get done with this program. So this could go for the mentors as well as the fellows. What would you change for next year for the mentors, or how would you even talk about how this experience has been for you? And for the fellows as well, what are you going to go home and tell your friends about, or what are you going to pass on as far as your experience at Stanford and the PhD exposure you got here? Whoever wants to jump in, feel free.
I can start. For me, this experience reaffirmed my interest in research. Learning what the grad students do, how they do the process, all the classes that we have been doing, just reaffirmed my interest in going to a PhD program. I don't know where it's going to be, but that's for sure.
And what would you tell someone if they were saying, maybe I want to do a PhD program? What questions might you ask them, or how would you determine if you think it would be good for them as well?
Well, I would tell them that they might need to go to a program like this one.
Yeah.
Because that's the best way that you can see if you would like to do it or not.
Absolutely. Being
a place like this, with mentors like them, seeing what they are doing, seeing how is the life of a grad student, that's important, and then see all the things that you will need to do, because PhD programs mainly is about research. That's my understanding. So you really need to like that, to be doing that.
Very cool. Yeah. And that exposure before you've made the investment is so huge, because it is, 3 to 6 years for a lot of programs. And that's a huge investment in your life. Mm-hmm. Who wants to go next?
I feel like for me, something I'm going to take home is this idea of access and what it means to be able to access professors you're interested in working with, or grad students who are doing the work that you want to do one day. And that's something that I feel like before coming into this program, I had no conception of how much that access could influence your idea of even thinking of yourself as a grad student, or thinking of this grad program or a PhD program, like even thinking that's a possibility for yourself. And I feel like bringing that back to like my community and my family, and just seeing my younger cousins and being able to serve, hopefully as a mentor in even the slightest way that so many people here during this program have done for me, I think would be amazing, and hopefully help build at least a little bit of confidence that I think makes that difference of, this person who has been there, who has seen what this grad program is like, they think I can do it. Maybe I can do it, know?
So if you were talking to, say, a younger cousin or friend or somebody who maybe hasn't had that kind of exposure or access, what kind of advice would you give them for how to start seeking it out, or getting exposure to people that could maybe help inspire them or get to that next level?
Yeah, I feel like something that I've always been told is find somebody that you're interested in and that's doing the work you're interested in, and kind of try to see what kind of path they followed to get to where they are today, whether that be just a Google search and you find this really cool person that's doing this really amazing work in the area that you're interested in, and seeing, they went to this school and maybe they went to this nonprofit and then maybe they did this, and not being afraid to reach out, which is also very scary. I'm still struggling with it, even though I feel like I can totally do it, but not being afraid to reach out to people, because for the most part, it seems like there's a lot of helpful people out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I can tell you, just from running this show, we're always reaching out to people and asking them, hey, you want to give us your time? We're not paying our guests to show up, right? And it becomes a much more comfortable thing. The more you're willing to ask, the more times you start putting yourself out there and finding new people to ask for things.
Very true. It's kind of like
Powerful.
Breaking down your own, barriers or like self-consciousness. Like, what if they say no? I mean, you don't know unless you try.
Yeah, absolutely. Who else? What else? Takeaways or changes for next year?
I would just say a major takeaway for me is just like, I'm in no rush. There is no rush to get to a PhD program. Like, you can take your time if you want to get a master's first, or if you want to go teach for a while, gain your experience, and then come back, and then so that you know what you actually want to research and what you want to study, and not just jump right in and be like, well, I don't know, I guess I'll figure it out along the way, because you're just going to add more time of being in the program. So I just learned. That's not the only thing I learned, of course, but a major takeaway for me, I was in this battle with myself of whether I should get a master's first and then go teach or just jump into the PhD. And so I've learned that there's no rush. I can do whatever I want to do in a sense, and I can still be great either way. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That is awesome. Yeah, just finding your way and taking some of those experiences along as you go. And it is not ever too late, assuming you're still growing and trying to learn. That's the point, right?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So let's get more into as well. I'd like to hear what people have found with this 6-week course. What have some of the findings and research that you have been working on as well? Some of the big things that stick out. Actual
findings, or what the projects are coming up with as information. That sounds neat. I'd like to hear from maybe the fellows about that. What is your project actually coming out with? Yeah. Take a shot. It's okay. I'm sure all your mentors are listening to the radio right now, and they'll text you if they need to add a little extra comment. I'm sure it'll be great.
Well, working on Ben's research, something that we just found, and you mentioned this earlier, is we're looking at the data from his survey, and he has all these questions on there trying to gauge people's math anxiety and how they think about math in relation to themselves. And there was one question on there, and it was just straightforward, are you a math person, yes or no? And that was the biggest question that correlated with all the other data on their like math anxiety metrics. So it was really interesting how we talk a lot about implicit bias and how people may not be aware that they're biased against math, but people definitely are.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be interesting to see where we go with that on using his survey again and changing it up a little.
So did most people say they were not a math person?
I don't remember.
It's not about necessarily who or who isn't, but it's more looking at comparing, say, like the answer on that question to a whole bunch of other measures and being like, wow, it's so highly correlated. It's almost like you don't need to ask 100 questions. You can just ask that one. Wow. And this is preliminary, so don't hold me to that. It might change once I figure out how to do statistics again. Yeah.
I think I can speak for me and Dominique in terms of that we don't have actual findings yet because we're at the early stages of designing a study. But one thing that possibly, if I can speak for both of us, that we found is that submitting 3 different IRBs is a big process. So there's not just the institution IRB, that's also the school district. And if you're doing multiple districts, they both ask for different things. So it's a lot of work that goes into it, where you might think that it's like a quick process where it's just like you fill out a form and you submit it, but it's actually having to really pay a lot of attention to what you're asking of the students, what you're asking of the school district, what you're asking of the teachers, and that's going to vary depending on the context. Yeah.
What were some of the things that they were maybe giving you feedback on, or some of the real careful considerations you have to make to work with the students in schools?
Well, it depends also on the school district. There's school districts that have a longer process because they have possibly multiple projects happening within their school district versus a school district that doesn't have as many projects. A school wanting to work with multiple schools within one district versus just one school in a different district. So all of that's going to vary. Yeah.
Interesting, yeah. IRB, it's one of those funny things, right? You're always just like, I'm going to do my research, but first someone needs to tell me it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, so as a journalist, I genuinely have to contact parents to be able to get approval to talk to them. Is that also a familiar process in research when you're dealing with underage children?
Definitely. Yeah. So you have to have parent consent forms. You have to be able to have them in multiple languages depending on the language that the students speak. There's not just parent consent forms, but then on top of that, there's also student assent forms where the student themselves have to agree to be part of the study. There's multiple parts for my particular study. We're not just we're doing classroom observations, teacher interviews, student interviews, and student surveys, so there's multiple parts where like the parent can approve and can't approve. So it's really trying to get all of your checks crossed in order to be able to have a complete study. Because if the parent says yes to the survey, but then says no to having the student being videotaped, it's hard to make those connections.
So how... Actually, I lost my train of thought. Apologize. So, is anyone else?
We could hear from the last group here about your what you're hoping to bring out from your research.
Well, we have findings from one pilot interview that has influenced our interview protocol. So, do you want to talk about that?
Yes. When I was interviewing this person, I kind of knew his background, so I assumed that he was going to be easily understanding everything, and I found out that when I talked to him about the claim that I was trying him to understand, he didn't understand. Even he has been in the educational system here in the United States for several years. Mm-hmm. So I had to translate to him, and then he came back and gave me the answer, the answer in English again, and using, scientific language, etc. But it was interesting for me to witness that he didn't understand the claim, so I had to use translanguaging, translate that. And then he went back and, okay, yes, now I understand in Spanish. And then he gave me the answer in English, So that was like, oh, wow. We were like, what is that?
Yeah. One of the things we talked about a lot is that this student that Gabriela interviewed, he is bilingual in Spanish and English, and he has been in school in a English-speaking setting for many years. And so he did not use any Spanish at all when he was talking. We're asking him questions about, here's a scientific claim. What do you think about that? Do you think it's true? Have you heard this? What does this mean to you? And so he did ask, she offered to explain the scientific idea to him in Spanish, and he said, yes, please, right? He said yes. Mm-hmm. So she explained it to him in Spanish, and then he gave his understanding in English. Mm-hmm. But we talked a lot about, the fact that he didn't end up using Spanish and how there are these monolingual norms in school that he's probably learned.
Yes.
And so even though the space was open and both languages were being used, he still spoke only in English.
So you think that's kind of trying to satisfy an expectation that you're supposed to give your answer in English, or...
We wonder, we were just wondering what may have caused this. And potentially he may have learned either explicitly or implicitly in school, we speak English.
Right.
Because he knows that the person interviewing him is bilingual. She's shown him that. And yet he's still... so it just really raised more questions for us, really, than answers.
Right. And I think the general social convention is you respond in the language you were spoken to, right? So if someone says hello in Spanish, you respond in Spanish if you're able. Is that the kind of general way you would expect someone to...
Could you say it again? I got lost.
Oh, I'm saying the social convention is generally to speak back in the language you were spoken to, right?
Yes,
so when he switched back to English, is that kind of the sticking point where you're like, interesting?
What we're doing also is now trying to narrow more our interviews and the people that we're going to interview to be more like emergent bilingual. Mm-hmm. This child is already a bilingual person, so he feels comfortable speaking in English. Just in this aspect, he was using Spanish. But maybe what we are going to end up doing is narrowing to really an emergent bilingual that is in high school, so we can really see if we can draw from the child, all these explanations using translanguaging. Mm-hmm.
Very, very cool. It's actually giving a chance to see if they have the information.
Yes.
If they're giving a chance to use whatever tools are available instead of just, can you do it in this one way?
Yes,
exactly.
Very neat, very neat. So we're getting already kind of close to...
we have a point.
I'd like to jump in really quickly. My mentor is further along in his dissertation, so right now we have about 2 years worth of survey data that I'm coding. And so that's been a process.
Can you explain what coding means for the audience? I'm not sure everyone would totally know what that's referring to.
You can do different types of coding, but part of my journey here has been using a software that takes the data itself. So for us, it's been open-ended questions and closed-ended questions, and taking the responses of the participant, and we created a code book before. And so, for example, a code that we have is ask questions. So whenever I read the responses and either the tutor or the student is talking about a question that they've been asked or that they are asking, I'll go ahead and I'll highlight it in the software, and then I select it and it gets dropped into a little folder that says ask question. So every time I see that, I do that. And by the end of coding for that specific ask question, we'll see in the survey every time that's come up. And I'd say with the time that I've spent here, something that's been really cool, and I'm not sure it was the purpose of me coding, but coming up with new questions when I do see something that's interesting. So, for example, yesterday I was thinking about, there's this question that asks the tutors what would they do if their student is disengaged when it comes to tutoring? And so I was reading through these responses, and for me it was really interesting to see the knowledge that they've gained by being a student in a classroom elsewhere is now being reproduced in how they tutor their students. So something I've been thinking about is how do you trace that knowledge, or where does that knowledge come from, and how can we compare that against the other ways and the different ways that other tutors are tutoring?
Mm. All right. Thanks for explaining coding too, because sometimes we throw out these research jargon kind of words, and then the audience is like, huh? What does that mean, right? So it sounds
I kind of assumed the computer coding right there.
Right. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking about, so we're all in education at some level. We're interested in education. I'm wondering, for the fellows moving forward, do you have a sense of what might be your idea or topic, or even, I know this would change a million times if you even do go into a PhD program, but do you have a sense of where you might want to put your energy if you were to continue with this research and education track, and what that might look like for you, in a year or 2 or 10, if you really were to follow that out?
Okay, for me, I know what I want to do, and so I'm going to focus in preschoolers who are children of immigrant, and I'm going to try to develop a curriculum for them that is linguistically, culturally, and developmentally appropriate. That's one of my plans, and focus in aspects that create barriers for them to be successful in school.
Okay, so this is a curriculum that you would like to develop that would actually be more about like person development than individual subject development?
Well, this curriculum that I'm thinking about needs to have aspects of the children, cultural aspects and linguistic aspects. Many curriculums in the early childhood, they are just a lot about creativity, stuff like that. But you get a lot of books that are not really representing the children.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the aspects for me, very important, because a child needs to see successful people in books, and needs to know that he can learn through his language, whatever content it is, not just through one language. Because when you tell to a child, you need to learn this content and you need to learn the language, those are two different things.
Right.
So if you can somehow use the home language as a bridge to the second language and content, that would be easier for them,
Yeah, textbook accessibility is huge. We just had a guest on recently who was working on a label for textbooks that would tell you kind of what types of intelligent designs, or that's a loaded word, but intelligent, thoughtful ways of putting together the book were done to make it more accessible for other languages, or cognitive disabilities, or different types of ways of accessing the information. So that's a huge thing, and we're supportive here. Okay, well, let's move on to the next. Yeah, any of you, if you want to jump in, what this is speculative, honestly. Like, what do you think you might want to take on as your issue or your area of focus?
And it's okay not to know.
I feel like for me, throughout college, I've always been interested in civic engagement, but it was always something that was on the side of what I was studying, and also something that I never considered doing research for, because I saw that and I was like, okay, this is relevant if I want to be a community organizer or something that is like direct, impactful work. And so I didn't realize that you could go and study civic engagement and do things like participatory action research and engage communities in that way. And so I'm trying to see if I can merge those interests with politics and education and psychology and see if I can come up with some research question that will allow for all of those. So,
because you will be working with the program Ignite, correct? Which helps young women teach civic engagement.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping this next year I'll learn a little bit more about what my research question is. But
well, I'm sure
really
it will evolve over time. So the more information you have, the better, right? Mm-hmm. Very cool. Very cool. Who wants to go next?
I'll go. I've been working in an elementary school for the past few years, and something that I've become really interested in is how can we support children that have experienced trauma, and how, or building on that, like why are some children able to experience trauma and do it through resiliency and others aren't. So I know that's very general, and there's a lot of ways that you can approach that, but those are my research interests as of now.
Okay. And is there a reason you've gravitated towards people with trauma?
So the schools I've been working at, I was working as an after-school program coordinator, and something that was a big theme was how do we support students that are going through quote-unquote behavioral issues. And something that I noticed when I would talk to families is that there's so much more going on at home that, I didn't know about, and I'm sure a lot of the school staff didn't know about either. And you would see that in how the student was behaving and interacting in the classroom. So that I think is really important. And I'm hopefully one day I can contribute to that field of knowledge.
Yeah, it sounds like you're recognizing that these behaviors aren't just popping up because it's a bad kid, but there's actually real life problems behind that behavior, and that it's worth looking at that, right? I've seen this so much in classrooms where it's easy to say, oh, it's a bad kid, look. But that's just
that is an epidemic problem in schools, and they even start early in kindergarten, taking out children from classrooms because they have behaviors. So.
Suspensions. Yeah.
Right. And it's easier to blame the victim than it is to find out what happened to them and why they're acting that way. And I don't know, I never met a kindergartner that was evil. I'm sure there might be like one in a million years who just was actually born evil, but in a movie. But in real life, I think kindergartners are just kids trying to do their best. And as you go through, even in high school, that's where I did all my teaching. And I never saw a bad kid. I just saw kids that had a hard time. I had kids that, students that had difficult family lives. And it's just the same thing everywhere you go. People aren't just mean for the sake of being mean or defiant because they don't like you. Well, maybe if they don't like you, but it's generally not because they're mad at you. It's because they're having a hard time elsewhere.
So it doesn't have like a malicious intent.
Adults, I don't know, maybe they're malicious. It's hard to say, but I never blame children. Okay, you want to jump in? Where do you think you might head from all this?
So mine is very similar. My research interests are very similar to Jamila's. I also want to focus on trauma in early childhood, but I also want to look at what's coming to light more in research, which is adverse childhood experiences, or otherwise known as ACEs is the acronym for it. And I want to look at early childhood trauma, of course, and how that affects their brain development, their physical development, and how all of that impacts their educational development. And then somehow, some way come up with I don't know about intervention plans, but some way to kind of like intervene and just step in as another role model for them and just be there for them as teachers. So that, of course, kind of falls somewhere along the way into, I wouldn't say curriculum, but just like into the back of a teacher's mind that like you're saying, like kindergartners aren't just evil for no reason. They
maybe never evil at all. I don't know. Yeah.
It's like they're going through something at home that you may not know about, and that's really important because that translates and brings over into the classroom, which affects how they act and participate in the class and act with other students. And so, yeah, that's a little summary. I'm in the same ballpark as...
can I say something? Dr. Becky, the creator of Conscious Discipline, she says that aggression stems from pain. Mm-hmm. So if a child is being aggressive, there's a big pain inside them, because if you are trying to help them, be kind with them, and they still are aggressive, there's a big pain inside the child.
So another piece of my research interest also, I guess, falls into an identity portion in a sense because I'm looking at, I want to look at multiracial minority students. Most times because multiracial students or multiracial minority students get pushed into this other category and they're not necessarily recognized. Let's say you're filling out a survey and then they have like white, black, Native American, Hispanic, and then it's like, well, other. And so it's just like, well, forget about the other kids. It doesn't really matter. They can just fall into that other category. And so I want to focus on those students because I feel like they just get stigmatized and just pushed off. And it's more important.
Yeah, which group do you fit in? Oh, not a nice, clean one, an easy one to categorize for statistics? Cool, you don't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah, it's a great observation, actually. And it's such a silly thing that we're always trying to put people in little buckets, right? You're this, you're that. Cool, now I completely understand you. And that's actually kind of the basis of a lot of my work is looking at bias, because biases are essentially that desire to put people in buckets as quick as possible. It makes us not have to think very much. And it's really handy when you're trying to not have to think, but it's not really realistic or representative of people. People have so many different buckets we fit in. And it's like, it's pointless to even have a bucket.
Which brings up, I guess, the idea of like, how do we end up starting to categorize? I don't know if we have too much time to talk about this, but like, how do we categorize people or not categorize in this environment, especially with children and in education?
Is common, the misbehaving, the quiet, the one who's always crying,
Yes.
That's something that happens.
And working in that environment, I see that all the time with teachers starting to place the kids in buckets. Oh, possibly this kid has ADHD. We don't have the doctor's note, but we're assuming, or maybe this child's on the spectrum, and it's always these assumptions that are made without much to back it up.
And you miss how much that affects the way you teach kids as you're going through that. So we are just about out of time. This hour went by pretty quick. They always do. But anybody have a last minute thought? I want to say hi to Mom before you go.
I just wanted to say, what you asked about what we would change about the program, and I just would say more people, more opportunities, more funding for this program. It's been really great getting a chance to be in the first group that participated in this, and I really hope it can continue.
Yeah, I'd also like to add, if there's ways to make it be not necessarily longer in terms of more than 6 weeks, but like a continued endeavor. I feel lucky that I will get to continue to work with Dominique, but I know that that's not necessarily going to be the case for everyone. And I think that should be embedded within and not just be a possibility, but be part of a requirement for the program.
Yeah, I think that's powerful, right? I mean, first of all, more students means we have more possibilities for getting people into these programs. And then secondary, or not secondary, but parallel, just being able to have that long-term support, because things don't change a life in 6 weeks. Someone doesn't just completely turn around where they're headed or what they're thinking about, and that long-term mentorship can be a huge piece of that, right?
Yeah, and I think it just adds to the knowledge of what it is to be a PhD student. Like, it's not 6 weeks where your project gets completed, right? It's a process, and a lot happens over that process, and it's long-term. It's a 5-year program, not just a 1-year program. So getting to see that continued partnership with that mentee would be great.
Mm-hmm. Those are just great things for us to leave off on. So I just want to thank all of our guests for coming in today. Thank you for taking your time to come in and sharing your ideas and sitting around here with these funny looking headphones on with us for an hour. I am Ben Woodford here with Modern Education. We're here every Friday from 3 to 4 p.m. as you are on your commute home or streaming online on the web. If you are doing that, it's kzsu.stanford.edu/live. You can always call in at 855-723 223-9010. This is Modern Education.